Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Pits of Motorcast. This is your host, Dave. I got a nice special guest, former Top Fuel Dragster driver, Lori Johns. How you doing, Lori?
I'm doing great, Dave. How are you?
Not bad, not bad. The weather's cooling off now, so, I'm kind of digging it.
Where in Illinois are you?
Close to Wisconsin border.
Oh, okay. You have a little bit of Wisconsin accent.
I guess. I don't know how Wisconsin people sound, so I wouldn't know.
Yeah, well, they're up there along the Canada border. You've got your Minnesota accents and your Wisconsin accents and your Illinois accents. You all kind of have a little bit of a different one, but yours is a little bit Wisconsin-y.
Now, you were born and raised in Texas, right?
Corpus Christi, Texas. That's right. Love my hometown. Me and Selena and Sarah Fawcett are all from Corpus Christi. And Terry Labonte, too. The NASCAR driver. And Bobby Labonte, his brother.
So now, Lori, what got you into doing drag racing? Was it your dad, or how'd you get into drag racing?
It was my father. My dad was in the car business, and so I grew up around cars. I mean, I remember some of my first memories were riding in his dune buggy on the beaches in Padre Island. Corpus is right near Padre Island, northern tip of it, and he and his friends built custom-made boats riding dune buggy, and they were built where if you put the gas pedal on the floor, they had skid pads in the back, and they stood straight up on the rear tires and did wheelies all the way down the beach. And I remember sitting in the passenger seat of my dad's dune buggy doing that from the time I was about 2 years old. And he had a drag car too, so they all drag raced, and we would go to the drag races and watch him. My mother would take me and my sister out there, and I remember riding around the pits, on the floorboard of his Chevelle. I can remember the sound and the excitement and the lights. And they used to race at Cudahy Field. There used to be a tower there. The announcer's tower was built out like an old dragster. It actually rolled around. You could drive it around. The bottom base of the tower was a dragster, and it had a tower coming out the top that was the announcing from it. It was really cool.
Wow. So what year did you start drag racing yourself?
Well, I always wanted to be a race car driver from the time I was a little girl. I grew up riding horses. I got my first motorcycle when I was 5 years old, and I loved riding my dirt bike. I had a little Indian, I had a little Honda, I had a Yamaha for a while, and I had this wonderful horse that I used to rodeo on all the time, and I loved riding horses. And then I turned 16 and I got a car, and I left all that behind. I was in love with cars, and my father wouldn't let me race cars because he said, you don't know anything about them. And you can't drive a race car until you know how to do everything on a race car. So I took an auto mechanics course when I was in high school for 3 hours a day for a year. And during the middle of that time, I started racing my 1986 4-speed Corvette. And the very first race that my father and I went to was at Alamo Dragway, and he taught me how to speed shift it on the side of the road. And it was my first bracket race, and we entered it, and I won.
So now,
I will never forget the day I died. Talking to me, telling me stories, but I'm gonna get so upset, but it's so nostalgic. But I remember coming home and my mother kept me out the back door in her row because it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. She had to drive home to San Antonio to Corpus Christi, and she said, "How did you do?" And I had a trophy in my hand. And I said, "I won."
So now, for you, how was the experience going down a drag strip for the first time ever in a car?
What?
How was the experience for you for the first time ever going down a drag strip in a car?
In my Corvette, like the very first time, or when I got my actual race car?
No, your very first time in the Corvette.
It was incredibly exciting. I mean, incredibly exciting. There was actually,
Hello?
You there?
I lost you for a second.
Okay. His name was David Johns, and we had the same last name, and he was from Floresville. And he just kind of tutored me and mentored me. I didn't understand how the Christmas tree worked. I didn't understand the bracket racing system. I mean, I learned it all that very first night. And that man, David Johns, helped me in my very first drag racing. It was very exciting. I just absolutely loved it. Became addicted. How could you not become addicted to something that you win the first time you enter it?
Now, how long did you do the bracket racing for?
I I bracket raced through high school, but shortly after I started racing, my father bought me a 1969 Chevy Nova. It was called the Tequila Sunrise, and it had it had 3-speed transmission. It was really like 1020 in the quarter, and we used to take it around to the big bracket races. And I raced at Green Valley, and I raced at Temple, and I raced at Houston International, and I raced in San Antonio. We raced at all those things. We raced in Porter, and just different drag strips all around. And then when I graduated from high school, I went to Texas A&M University, and my freshman year, my dad ordered me a Biancano Dragster from Don Ness in Blaine, Minnesota. He was an artist, but wonderful, incredible genius of a man. He built all the pro stock cars, a lot of the pro stock cars, and he had only built a few little dragsters, and he built one for me. And initially, we had Rare Morrison do the motors, and then we put to John Liefelter. And I had a lot of success with that little dragster. I won Rookie of the Year in 1996, and HRA gave me the Rookie of the Year award in 1996. And 1985, because in 1986, I went to Baton Rouge to the Cajun Nashville, and I was racing that car, and I had a really bad accident, and I broke my neck and my back. I had to wear a halo brace for 6 months.
Yeah, I read about that. Jim Van Cleve's gas dragster went on a guardrail and then landed on.
Well, actually, I had a gas dragster. I had a Biancano dragster, which is a little 315 cubic inch. I was 338. I think it's 338 cubic inch Chevy small block. And he had a Ford Mustang, a full body car. Competition eliminator races. It's a lot like bracket racing, but it's different in that there is no breakout. You're trying to run under a national index. And he lost control of his car in the first round and crossed the center line and climbed the guardrail and landed on me. And it took a couple of years for me to recover from that accident because I had to have 4 different surgeries. They fed me through a tube through my nose at one point for 19 weeks. I had a hole in my esophagus. And my parents, my father especially, was not really sure. I always said I wanted to race cars again. I didn't never want to quit. And my father said, well, how do you know you're not going to be afraid? Because your mother and I are terrified of what could happen to you. And I said, well, I don't think I'm going to be afraid. I just don't know why I would be. So he worked out where I could go to Frank Hawley's school and learn to drive their top alcohol dragster. And so it used to be a 3-day course, and there was like 4 people in it. And Frank's an amazing coach and an amazing teacher. And I think on the second day driving the car, I drove it the quickest and fastest it had been at that time, their top alcohol car. Because the guys in the shop were all excited. I said, what are you all excited about? He said, well, I didn't want to tell you, but she just broke our school record. He said, we didn't even think that car could go that fast.
Wow.
So I wasn't scared. But my poor parents sat in the grandstand. It was there at Gainesville in Florida at the Gainesville track. And after I made my first pass in the alcohol dragster, I came, we had rented a Cadillac, we'd flown down there, and I got in the car and they were both crying. And I said, why are you crying? They were scared.
So
we got over that. So they were scared that I was going to get hurt again, but I wasn't. And so after I went to Frank Hawley School, my dad ordered a top fuel dragster to be built by Dave Yahara in Yuba City, California. And I'm so emotional about old age. But anyway, and then we hired Tim Farrell as our crew chief. Tim Farrell had worked for Kalani Kalani for years and years and years. He's a truly talented guy. He came on board and became my crew chief, and we had lots of help from lots of people. Joe Faulkner came and helped us, and his wife Debbie, and we just had an incredible amount of success. It was a great story. I mean, those days of my life I will cherish forever.
So what year did you get your license for the top fuel dragster?
1988. I actually got my license at Texas Motorplex in Ennis. We rented a track several days in a row, and Dave settled, and Billy Meyer signed my driver's license.
Nice.
Yeah. So, we had gone, before we went to Ennis, me and my dad and Tim took the top fuel dragster to Edinburgh, to the drag strip down there, just went down to the finish line. They had a really long finish line area, and Tim taught me how to do burnouts. It was just the three of us, just me and my dad and Tim. And we had that top fuel dragster, and he had it set up so soft that we did Tim would stand in front of the car, and we did burnouts all day long.
Okay, so what was the experience like for you to drive a top fuel dragster for the first time ever?
Well, it's funny because I remember this day the look on Tim's face, because he knew what it was going to be like. Like the very first time he put me in the car, and he and Daddy were standing there, and they started it. He was so patient with me and so kind. And he said, it's really going to be something when you step on the throttle and do this burnout. And it was. And I remember he turned around and looked at me. He had his hands like big circles around his eyes. Like, are your eyes this big? And they were. But it wasn't until we got to the Motorplex, and Tim put a cone up on the wall at the point where he wanted me to drive to. And I remember when I learned to drive my little 10-second Nova, there was a man named Paul King who worked for my dad, who built the motor for that car. And he was actually held the national record for a long time in NHRA too. He was an old-time drag racer. And I used this every time I learned to drive a new car. I used it when I drove my BA dragster, I used it when I drove the alcohol dragster, and I used it when I drove my top fuel car. Paul King was riding on the floorboard of my Nova with me at San Antonio when I learned to drive it. He built the whole car and put it together. And he wasn't even wearing a helmet. He was holding on the roll cage while I drove that car. And like the third time we were at the starting line, he said to me, "Okay, Lori, now I want you to make me a promise. This next time, when it starts going really fast, I don't want you to let up. I want you to promise me that you're going to keep your foot down till we get to the finish line." And I said, okay. And that time I made my first full pass. And every time I learned to drive a new car, I remember Paul King saying that to me. And when they said it's time for you to make a full pass, even though it was in my nature to pull my foot back because it was so fast, I kept my promise and I kept my foot down.
So now
it's just a hurdle to get over like everything else. I mean, once you make that first full pass, you're done, and you know what it feels like, and you can do it over and over again. And eventually it becomes a routine. I mean, you quit noticing, or at least I hope that a good driver quits noticing how fast and quick and everything is, and starts paying attention to what they have to do to drive the car the right way.
Yeah, so it didn't take you long at all to overcome your injuries.
Well, it took a couple of years. It took 2 years. And of course they plague me now because I'm 53 years old, and I shattered C7 in my neck and broke my back in 3 places, and I broke my collarbone and my right wrist, and I would have had permanent brain damage, but my brain stem was left fully intact. My brain was bruised and bleeding on all sides, and the blood came out in my eye socket, so my eye was just huge. But I was just very, very blessed. I didn't, like, 10 years after the accident, I went back to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where I had my accident, to see the neurosurgeon that had done my original surgery, because he put a bone implant in my neck, a sarcophagus bone from a bone bank, and then he fixed it with a plate and 3 screws. And I had been having multiple surgeries on my neck, and I was having a lot of pain about 2 years after my accident, and I went back to Baton Rouge, and I was getting what they call a trauma scan. And this doctor walked in, "Do you?" And I said, "No, I don't." And he said, "My name is Dr. Boudreau." And he said, "I was in the emergency room the night they brought you in of your accident." And he said, "I would have given 10 cents for your life."
Wow. So fast forward to 1990. In 1990, you became the 3rd woman to win a NHRA Top Fuel event.
I did. I was very. I mean, that's one of the most glorious days of my life. I won the Winter Nationals. I beat Eddie Hill in the first round, and Don Prudhomme in the second round, and Kenny Bernstein in the semis, and Dick LaHaye in the final. And that was actually, I don't know if you remember or not, but up until that point in time, both the Snake and Kenny had raced Sunny Car all those years. And in 1990, they both switched over and started racing top fuel dragsters. So that was their very first race in top fuel dragsters, and I put both of them on the trailer and sent them home. That's one of my favorite trivia questions. Who beat Don Prudhomme and Kenny Bernstein in their first race in top fuel? Lori Jones.
Wow.
But yeah, Dick LaHaye and I ran identical 503s. I beat him off the starting line by, like, I don't know, it wasn't much, 400 or 500, and it made the difference, and I won the race. It was so close. It was so close. It was I probably crossed the finish line 2 inches in front of him. I watched our wheels all the way down, and I saw, and I knew what I saw, but I wasn't really sure. I kept thinking I won, but I had made lots of passes in the top fuel car by that time. And whenever you let off the throttle, you go through the finish line and you pull the parachute, you don't hear anything. I mean, there's not usually any other sound. You hear the car next to you, and your car is still running, and the engine's running, and you turn the fuel off, and they go, the RPMs raise up, and the fuel gets lean, and the car shut down. But when Dick LaHaye and I went to the finish line at Pomona, when we let off the throttle, I heard the crowd roar over our engine. I could hear the roar of the crowd, and I thought, "Oh my God, I won! I won!"
Yep, the third woman to win after Lucille Lee and
Shirley and Lucille Lee.
Yep.
Right, Shirley was the first one, and Lucille Lee she won a national event in Atlanta. It's a sad story, but she passed away quite a few years ago. She's no longer with us. Lucille Lee. Still here.
Now, have you met both of them? I mean, before Lucille passed away, did you meet her?
I never did meet Lucille Lee. I understand, like, she drove that car for a very short time, and, people don't understand. I don't think people understand how hard that life is for a multitude of different reasons. And it's not because of the travel and the driving the car is hard, the work is hard. It's the pressure of being in that level of competition and that intensive competition. Back when I was racing anyway, it was fierce, and the points were crazy. And, if you just came to have a good time and drink beer afterwards, I guess it would be okay. But I wasn't there for that. I came to win. And I wanted to win every drag race. And I didn't win every drag race. So most of the time I was pissed.
So did you get to meet Shirley Muldowney?
Oh, absolutely. I raced Shirley many times. She was there when I was there. We were racing at the same time.
Now, out of you and Shirley, who won the most races? Do you remember?
Shirley never beat me.
She never.
Every time we met up against each other, I won.
Wow.
But it wasn't a girls' competition. We were not there to race each other. I was there to race everybody at the races, and luckily I beat all them too. Not on every day, but at one point or another, I beat every one of them. And in 1991, it was 1990. In 1990, I finished fourth, and it was Jared Ormsby and I guess Dick LaHaye and Ormsby and Bill Amato finished in front of me, and I was 4. So it's hard. It's hard. I'm very proud of that. In retrospect, that was a long, tough year, and it was at that time. It's been beaten since, but at that time, it was the highest finish by a rookie in the sport ever.
So how many trophies do you have?
What do you mean, over the years, or how many Wallies do I have? I have 6 Wallies from winning NHRA national events. But we did some IHRA racing, and we did a lot of match racing. I've raced in a lot of places across the country and seen lots of people, and what is amazing to me about that experience, the time that I spent so much time with people across the United States of America, and I'm still in contact with those people today. Those people still post up pictures of us together on my Facebook, and my life is still touched by them to this very day. I'm truly blessed.
Now, how did you get a big sponsor like Jolly Rancher?
They called me on the phone and asked if they could sponsor my car. Not the whole truth, but that's most of the truth. And when I first started racing Top Fuel, before we started racing, we were building our car and building our team. We had a really, really nice, really, really cool, magazine-type pamphlet made. It was, 10 pages long. It had a whole story, had all these color photos. It was amazing. And I spent weeks researching addresses and finding names and marketing director sponsorship proposals. And we did get some interest from some of them, but, that we just raced a few foot races in 1988. And in 1989, I guess it was the end of 1988, between 88 and 89, the marketing director for Jolly Rancher Candies, Joe DiLeonardo, called me on the phone at my parents' house and said they wanted to talk to me about sponsoring my car, and they bought me and my father plane tickets to come to Illinois. And we went up there and we negotiated the contract, and they sponsored me after that. It was a great deal. It was a great sponsorship. It was a great union. We did a lot of great things together.
Yeah, I was going to say that must have been pretty exciting to get someone like Jolly Rancher to sponsor you.
I was very happy. It was a great thing. They were one of the old-time drag racing sponsors. They originally, the Harmson family owned Jolly Rancher Candies there in Colorado, but they had sold out to a big conglomerate called Leaf Incorporated. It was owned by a parent company in Sweden called Huhtamaki. And because they had been in drag racing for so long, they actually carried the drag racing program on and expanded it. And John Force was my teammate, and it was great. We had a lot of fun back in those days. I did a lot of work for them. We did a science and safety video that went out to almost every high school in the United States. It went out to all kinds of driver's education programs, and I would go to high schools all over the country, wherever we were racing, and talk to kids about, racing and safety and the science and inertia and Newton's laws of motion and the things that you need to know to drive a car safely. So it was interesting. I did, we had lots of displays at lots of Costco's and Sam's. We used to give away the little go-karts that were painted like, they had go-karts. They said Lloyd John on the side of them and Jolly Rancher Candies. We used to give those away for both deal things. I got to do a lot of really neat things, but, people like to ask me what one of my favorite things was. I'll tell you, when Ronnie Swearinger was my crew chief and Paul Cosby and Billy Brooker were working for me, we were at Denver at the Mile High Nationals, and we ran the first 4-second pass on the mountain. And I tell you, I have a bond with everyone in Colorado to this day because of that. Because that was unbelievable. I've never experienced such excitement and such. It was as if we had all just, won the galaxy. Everybody, the people in the grandstands were just going crazy and jumping up and down the screen. We celebrated for what seemed like an hour. And like I said, Colorado is my favorite drag strip. The Mile High Nationals, a mile in the sky, and they said it couldn't be done. That nobody could run a 4-second pass in Denver, and I did it that night, and I cherished that moment. I cherished Ronnie Swearinger and the guys that were there with me. It was an incredible feat. It's an incredible memory.
So you said the track in Colorado was your favorite track to run on?
Absolutely.
So
because of that 4-second pass, because it was just I love that track, and that run. It was a Saturday night pass. It was dark, and it was so on the edge. I think my right rear tire was about 2 inches from the guard wall. But it was such a good pass, and I almost let out of it. I mean, it was so on the edge. I was pulling it as hard as I could to keep it off the guard wall. But you can't really steer those cars. You really have to finesse them. And I literally thought, I'm too close. I've got to get out of it. I thought, no, I'm not. And when I let off, it was dark down there, but I could see the people that worked the finish line jumping up and down off the ground. And I thought, I wonder what happened. And I slowed to a stop, and they were all screaming and hooping and hollering. I said, what happened? They said, you went 499. And just none of us could believe it.
So now, Lori, what other tracks stood out to you as good tracks to run on?
Let me just think. What are my other favorites? I loved them all. I really liked Memphis. The track in Memphis. I won that race 2 years in a row. I had back-to-back wins in Memphis, Tennessee. And I beat the Snake in the final, so it doesn't get any better than that one year. I guess I really like Gainesville. I love Gainesville. I mean, there's some great ones. I loved Englishtown, New Jersey. Englishtown one year with Ronnie Swearinger as my crew chief, who went all the way to the final, and we got beat by the Mongoose in the final. But Tom McHale was driving Jack Clark's Top Fuel Dragster, and beat us in the final at Englishtown, New Jersey. And that was a great dragster. It's not there anymore. They tore it down, and that's a shame. But I love New York City, and we were right across from New York City. I got to do all kinds of neat things and be on all kinds of great shows in New York. And I even got to, I got interviewed at I can't remember the guy's name. He had a radio show at Mickey Mantle's restaurant on Central Park, and I got to sit with Mickey Mantle at his table. So I got nominated for Female Athlete of the Year by the Women's Sports Foundation one year. Topeka's a great track, too. Topeka, Kansas is probably, I'll tell you that. I love Topeka, Kansas, and I'll tell you why. Because when we were in Gainesville, I was at the waiver trailer, and Gary Ormsby came up to me, and he and I were rivals, and he was really my nemesis. We raced, it seemed like every time I got to the semifinals, I had to race Gary Ormsby, and he beat me every time. I had so much respect for him. I just loved him. And I didn't even know he was sick in Florida. No one even told me he was sick. He hadn't told anybody. And he and his girlfriend came up to me. I was the waiver trailer, and he said, Lori, why don't you come with me to Topeka to do that match race? I said, I don't want to do a match race in Topeka. I don't want to do any more match races. I just want to race at national competitions. He said, oh, come on. And he was so funny. Like, when we used to race in Canada, we got to sell our own T-shirts on the back of our trailers instead of having NHRA selling for us, and we only got a percentage. And we made, lots and lots of money selling T-shirts. And he said, just think of all the money that we can make selling T-shirts. That was Gary's selling point to me. So somehow he taught me into it. That, and the guy that was the track manager had come to Gainesville, and he had promised the guy that owned the track in Topeka that he was not going to come back from Gainesville without my signature on a contract that I would match race Gary Ormsby there in Topeka. So it was several months later, and Gary and I had 3 match races, and he died right after that.
No,
he had leukemia. And so I found out later from his crew and his crew chief that he did that by design. That he knew that he was dying. We didn't know it. He didn't tell anybody. And there's somebody. I was so shocked when I found out how sick he was. And his crew chief said to me, Lori, you didn't realize how sick he was at the peak. He said, we probably had to carry him and put him in the car. And he beat me all 3 of those match races in Topeka, and I was so glad later that that's the last person he chose me to be the last person he raced against, and the last person he beat.
So leukemia got him, huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he was the finest man, just an amazing person. I couldn't have that. I was crazy about him, but he was a really, really quiet person. He didn't tell anybody that he was sick, and he didn't want anybody to know. And he raced right up until the very last time that he could. And after the Topeka race, he never came back to races again. He couldn't. He was a Toyota dealer from Auburn, California.
Now, have you raced at any tracks out here in the Midwest, like Illinois, Wisconsin area?
I have not, because, Indianapolis is the closest that I've been. We raced every year at the U.S. Nationals, but y'all didn't have a Route 66 dragway back then. It wasn't built yet. And being from South Texas, back when I was just doing regional races and backcountry races, you hear me?
Yeah.
I think my son's messing up.
So nowadays, Lori, do you go watch drag racing?
I don't. I have my people that I still love and care about and want to root for, but I don't really go to the drag races. It's just not something. I don't think I'm a good spectator. I don't think any of us are. It's like, Eddie and Nursey Hill. They haven't been back to the drag races once since he stopped racing. They never went back. And some people can go and they love it and they like being around, but for those of us who were really just purists and we wanted to race cars, we didn't really want to watch everybody else do it. We wanted to do it ourselves.
You think if you went to a big NHRA event, you think anyone would recognize you and say, "Hey, Lori, can I get your autograph?"
Well, I can tell you this: my late husband, who died in 2006, owned Houston Raceway Park. So I went to the drag races every single year at Houston Raceway Park. And one time, I guess probably around 2004, Kenny Bernstein and I were standing in the pits together talking, And more people asked for my autograph than asked for his. So, yes, I think that people would remember me. I went to Pomona for, I don't know what, some big anniversary they had. It was 20 years after I had won the Winter Nationals. So I went to Pomona, and people stopped me everywhere I went and asked for my autograph. So I think people would remember me. I was at the Long Beach Grand Prix with O.J. Simpson and Marcus Allen before O.J. killed his wife, because I was going to drive in his light car, and we were walking through the pits at the Long Beach Grand Prix, and more people stopped me and asked for my autograph than they did O.J. and Marcus Allen.
Wow.
So people know who I am.
Yeah.
I had a big fan following. I had like 100,000 members in my fan club. And they're all still around. I hear from them all the time.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
It is cool. I'm a truly, truly blessed person. I always say all the time that even if nothing good ever happens to me again, I never have the right to complain, because God has blessed me on my wildest dreams.
Now, besides Jolly Rancher, did you have any other big sponsors for the Dragster?
I did, and the Mr. Gasket Company. Joe Mudka owned the Mr. Gasket Company in Cradle Wheels, and they sold all kinds of products. He was a big sponsor of mine, and Torco Oil was a big sponsor of mine. Oh my gosh, Fram Auto Light did amazing things for me. We had so many product sponsors; it was unbelievable. And I'm trying to think of all the different ones. Aeroquip, people that make all of the fasters. I mean, we just really had a lot of support. Everybody that was in a position to help me just about did. Joe Pisano, I absolutely adored that man. In fact, the night that I ran the 4-second pass at the Mile High Nationals in Denver earlier that day, Joe Pisano was instrumental in helping me run the passes that I did when Tim Farrell was my coach, when I very first started in Top Fuel. He used to call me the girl. He used to say to my father, "How's the girl? Where's the girl?" Anyway, I just loved him, and basically what I'm trying to tell you in a nutshell is Joe Pisano died right in front of me on the side of the mountain in Denver that day. And then later that night, I ran the first 4-second pass, and I always thought that Joe was with me. I've always believed that. I was looking in his eyes when he died. And later that night, I ran the first 4-second pass of the mountain.
Wow. All right, so now, Lori, when you first started drag racing, what drivers were influential for you?
Well, fortunately for me, I didn't have any heroes in drag racing. I think if I had, I wouldn't have been able to race them as competitively as I did. I was not really big on people worship or role models or mentors at the time. I thought I had the world by the string, and for a while I did. So, but you got to realize when I was racing, all the greats were still racing. I mean, I raced against Joe Amato and Gary Ormsby and Frank Hawley and Dick LaHaye and Eddie Hill and, Don Prudhomme and Kenny Bernstein and Frank Bradley and Connie Coletta, for God's sakes. I mean, those are the people that I competed with at everything with Sterling Muldowney. I was fortunate to live in an era where I got to race the greatest legends that ever drove cars in drag racing. As I said, I mean, it was awesome. But I was never afraid of any of them or intimidated by any of them. I think that sometimes they were intimidated by me, but I carried myself that way. I wasn't afraid of anything. I had no fear, and I was very confident and assured that if I did my job right, I could win.
Now, did you ever go against Big Daddy?
I did not, but he was commentating. John Ross was doing the commentating when I was drag racing. He had really kind of retired. Remember, he worked for Diamond P at that time. And I'll never forget the second nationwide drag race we ever went to. We went to Brainerd, Minnesota. We left there, and the second nationwide drag race we went to was the U.S. Nationals in Indianapolis. And I look back on this now fondly and proudly, but at the time, I remember seeing this on TV, and I was so embarrassed by it. Because Don Galt came over and did a special, because the first pass that I made down the track at the U.S. Nationals was a 5:19. And it was the first sub-5:20 pass ever ran at that racetrack, and it broke the track record. So they made a big deal out of it. And Don Galt came over, and he had the microphone in his hand, and he had the TV camera, and he said, "Folks, I want to show you something. Come inside this trailer." And he took the camera, he said, "You know what's amazing about it?" He said, "There are no parts in here." And there weren't. We were independent racers running on our own money, and we were there, and you know what? We still did a heck of a job, and there were no parts in my trailer.
Wow.
We couldn't break any because they were the only ones we had.
Right.
Oh.
Now, have you ever raced the Greek?
Yes. In fact, Chris Kevin is a wonderful, wonderful man. And after I won the Winter Nationals, the way the trees go, you went from Pomona to Phoenix. So we were racing in Phoenix, and I guess it was after qualifying one night, and my father and mother and I went to eat at a restaurant, and we were walking by this one booth, and the Greek was sitting there, and he said, "Hey, Lori," and I turned and said, "Congratulations. I'm so proud of you. I can't believe it was congratulating me on my win in Pomona." And I said, thank you. And I said, "You're next." And he kind of grinned and looked down. And we went and centered him. My father said, "Lori, he's never won a national event." And that made me realize how important what I had just done was. Because here's a man who had been racing all of his life, and he had never won a national event. And I had done it in a year.
Wow, that's crazy.
I know. It was crazy.
And he's still out there going too. Nobody knows.
I know people believe it.
We don't know we don't know his actual age right now, but he's still going. He's somewhere up there in the 80s. I don't know.
Oh, he's in his 80s up. I promise you. He was 70 back then, I'm kidding. He wasn't young back then. But he was a great man. I mean, I got to race this. I raced against Jimmy Nix. I miss Jimmy Nix all the time. I miss Blaine Johnson. I miss Scott Coletta terribly. I think of other people that were my friends that died in race cars. I was just writing on Facebook today about John Lingenfelter and what a tragic thing it was. I mean, you know, that's part of what we do. And I'll never forget, Kenny Bernstein said this to me, and I didn't understand it, was when Blaine Johnson got killed in his dragster at the U.S. Nationals. And Kenny said to me, "Well, Lori, we just have to go back and do our jobs now. We're mid." And I said, "Well, I'm not." You know, kind of funny.
Yeah. So now, when you used to, when you were drag racing, for you, did you have any pre-race like rituals or superstitions at all?
I never did. I never believed in any of that stuff, but I prayed a lot. I had a strong and tremendous faith in God, and I tell you, if He hadn't been holding me in the palm of His hand and walking with me every step of my life, you and I would not be having this conversation right now, because I have been through some torrential things in my life, and I wouldn't trade any of it for a simple life if I could. I look back on the trials and tribulations, the things that I've been through in my life, and I thank God for every one of them, because they've made me who I am. And there's no way that I could have learned the lessons that I learned or know the things that I know now if He hadn't put me through the things He put me through to show me that I could walk through them.
Yep, he's always up there, he's watching over. That's what the good...
Well, let me tell you what, I never meant to be a special project for God, and I'm sure He didn't mean for me to be either, but I think I've caused him he's had to be extra diligent with me to make sure I made it through. But, somehow through all the things that have happened in my life, I've come through the other side. And if I listen to the things that I listened to up until now, I don't think anything's going to take me out.
Now, did you have any accidents at all with the Top Fuel Dragster?
I never, the closest we came was when Larry Meyer was my crew chief in Denver. I guess a year before we ran the 4-second pass there, because it was a mile high, and I don't know what was going on. But we hydraulicked the motor right off the starting line, and it split the engine block down the middle. It threw the heads off of it. It pitched complete pistons up into the grandstand. A guy came over to me when I was signing autographs after that happened, and he had the piston and the stick he used to pick it up with that landed next to him in the grandstand because it was so hot he couldn't pick it up. But it broke the frame rail on my dragster, and I could feel my car flopping in the back. And I got out, and when I looked behind me, I could not believe my eyes because I was looking down to the frame rails at the asphalt on the racetrack. The engine block was there was no crankshaft. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and I didn't know how bad my car was damaged. But it was damaged pretty good. And Dick O'Hay came over, and he had a brand new car at the Hard shop, and he said, we had to race the very next weekend in Sonoma, and I was number 2 in the points, and I was going to lose my shot at number 1 over that explosion. And Dick offered to have the back half of his car cut off and have Davey, we both had Davey hard cars, have Davey weld Dick's car onto mine. It was the biggest nightmare, and I had to leave. Me and John Force were the first 2 people ever asked to be presenters at the International Motorsports Hall of Fame. And it was great because I got to meet, Dale Earnhardt was a presenter with us, and I met everybody from NASCAR and IndyCar, and it was great. But we didn't have any time. And I had to fly straight back to Birmingham, Alabama, and miss the first 2 days of qualifying. And the Today Show had a helicopter. It was laying up on the side of the mountain. It was going to interview me live. It was just a hectic time in my life. And then we ended up being runner-up to Del Amato at that race in Sonoma. And if I hadn't blown the tires off it, I'd have beat him. Wow.
So,
but the other issue is in Memphis. I think it was in a qualifying pass. I wheelstood the car, the highest it's ever been. It wheelstood right off the line, and I was looking at my front wheels up in the air. But luckily I was able to get out of it. I know some people aren't, but it slammed down pretty hard, and that's the only 2 times I would say anything sketchy happened. I was very fortunate. I didn't have any of the bad wrecks that anybody else had. My bad wreck came early on, back in 1986, in my big car, and I don't ever want to go through that again. I still have the holes in my head to prove it. The holes in my head are braced into my skull. I have 4 of them.
So now, what's the quickest ET you've had in a Top Fuel dragster?
481.
And what track was that at?
That was at the Texas Motorplex.
All right. Now, what used to go in the preparation and for you to get ready for, say it's when you had a weekend coming up for an NHRA event, what went into preparation for you?
Well, because of my sponsorship and my public relations firm, I had a public relations firm in Chicago at Water Tower Place called Nancy Williams Incorporated, and they represented Miss America too. And so they were pretty well connected. And a lot of what I did for Jolly Rancher was PR work. And so before I got to a national event, I never left my house after Tuesday morning because, like I said, if we raced in Atlanta, Georgia, I did a press tour in Atlanta, and I did a press tour in Birmingham, Alabama, and I possibly did one in Jacksonville, Florida. We went to at least 2 satellite markets and did the major market as well. So I would be doing press work for 3 days prior to arriving at the racetrack on Thursday to make my qualifying runs. That was my preparation. My preparation was answering the same questions over and over and over to different reporters in every town. And trying to do it enthusiastically. Because after a while, if somebody's asked you something for the 300th time, you start to lose your passion. But I try to keep it interesting.
Right. So you got to do a lot of different, like You had to do meet and greets and stuff like that.
I didn't do many of those. I mostly, because at the time we were such a human. It was a story. It was, I was a young girl, and